Alright, here we got some interesting fruit trees that I need to prune. First I have to consider the client. She's elderly and doesn't want to reach up there, and she shouldn't be up on a ladder, so I'm going to keep these trees much more compact. We've got here our two plum trees and an apricot. This little grouping right here, I don't know why it was planted that way, but it's a double. And one on the right is a plum and the one on the left is a cot. And I'm catching it just before the trees bloom. It's not too late yet, but you can see that some of the blossoms are just about ready to open up here. You see a little bit going on here, but we've got such a mass going on here. So what I need to deal with here is, first off, I have to look at the form of the tree. It's a very one-sided tree, which means it's going to be too heavy over on this side. And there's quite a bit of congestion in here. I need to get that out. So I'm gonna try to bring the whole tree down to about, I'm gonna say 7 or 8 feet. She wants to keep it real compact, and I think that is probably the right thing to do for this tight location back here. A lot of long whips on this. These trees this is a stone fruit. It bears on the second year's fruiting spurs. So I need to leave enough of the fruiting spurs on there to reproduce, but you also have to bear in mind that it's a type of tree that can become very heavy and overly laden with fruit. So if you don't cut it back enough and you don't minimize the amount of weight that's going to develop on it, sometimes these trees will just commit suicide. Now the plums, I'm not sure what varieties these are. This is the first time I've ever worked on these trees, so that they can also get pretty heavy as well. So it is what it is. I'll do the best job I can, and that's what they look like before, and I'll trim them and show you what they look like afterwards. Something else that you have to think about is the condition and the health of the branches that you're working on. At some times of the year it's really hard to differentiate, but you can see that all these buds are starting to swell, and this branch here is alive and there's some growth in here. But back in here, these are all dead twigs. So the first thing I need to get rid of whenever I do any kind of tree is all the dieback, all the diseased branches or the dead branches. And when you do that, that opens things up a little bit more and makes it a little bit more obvious what the next steps are going to be. Another thing that you want to do is there's a lot of these internal water sprouts that are just popping up and just really crowding out these crotches here. They're just going to grow up here and they'll be cutting out all the light. Once you get rid of those, then you define the structure of the tree a little bit better. Oh, look at this. Some kind of a gall growth right there. That's interesting. Not quite sure what that is. Anyway, let me keep working on it and we'll see how it goes. Now there's a right way and a wrong way to make your cuts, and these old cuts here are definitely wrong, leaving these big stubs, and there's a stub in there. Here's one that I had to cut off, but it was so close I just cut it with the handsaw first and left it a little bit long, and I'll clean it up later. Now you don't want to go too close. A flush cut is as bad as a stub. Actually, it's worse than a stub because you're opening up the wound to be larger than it needs to be. So if you understand the concept of the branch collar and retaining the branch collar, that's the proper way to make your cuts. Here's one that's it's a little bit better. I just made that one. I cut down. Maybe I should have left it just a little bit higher on this side right here. But I wanted to keep this one bit of growth over here to go back into the tree. Once again, I'm dealing with a real funny tree, so everything that I'm doing is based upon this awkward structure. Here's a stub from last year. This should be cleaned up, but I don't want to cut it back so flush that it'll cause this area of the tree to dry out and these branches will die. So I'll cut it off about half an inch in front of this, and I'll probably just go straight down on it just to clean it up. And once again, there's a lot of height up here I've got to bring down. I'll keep working. Now there are two primary tools that I use when I work on fruit trees. I've got my handsaw. I like the Japanese tri-edge blades because they make such a nice clean cut. And I also like a long straight blade. Some people like the big curved blades, but when you're getting into really tight little spots here, that straight blade helps an awful lot to make your cuts a little bit nicer. You have to go at it without too much of a vengeance, because you don't want to pull through and have it rip and then pull into something and make gouges over in the rest of the wood. So you have to, this is a tool that you don't have to exert a lot of force to use it, and it's a very delicate tool, and it's very relaxing to use. Now the second tool that I use is my hand pruners. My personal favorite are Felco's, but a good Corona number 80 is nice too. I just like the shape of it, the way it feels in my hands. But frankly, I'm going to do probably 60% or 70% of the work on this tree with these tools right here. This particular hand pruner is fairly new. I lose them occasionally, but they're good. I keep them sharp. Sharp tools are essential. Another aspect of working with tools is disinfecting your tools. A lot of people don't recognize the importance of disinfecting, but if you're working through a tree, say a pear tree that's covered with fire blight, and every cut that you make is a dead cut that's infected with this fire blight disease, and then you go through and you start making fresh cuts, what you're actually doing is you're spreading that problem throughout the whole tree. How do you sterilize your tools? Very easy. You can just get a can of Lysol and spray it on there, and it actually helps to knock off some of the pitch. Wipe it clean after you use it every time. And if you're doing some problem work, get rid of all the infected branches first, and then clean your saw so that you get it all out of the way. And if you clean your saw before you go to the healthy branches, you shouldn't have a problem. But a lot of little tips that gardeners and a lot of homeowners don't recognize, and if you do it wrong, you can actually cause more problems than what you think. Okay, I've done all the larger cuts and cleaned up the stubs, but you'll notice that I haven't done any outside shaping or reduction yet. If you do a fruit tree in stages and get rid of all the bad branches, say bad meaning dead or crossing over or something wrong with them. Sometimes you'll see broken branches or areas that are starting to die back, like up and through here. If you get rid of all that stuff first, then it seems to show the way for the next steps that you have to make and what you have to do. You notice that already that tree is looking considerably cleaner. It's looking more open. There's not a lot of congestion. I'll thin out a little bit more with the hand pruners, but I'm getting fairly close to being done. Once again, I didn't trim these trees last year, and all the cuts that were made with a tool that wasn't very sharp. So you can see the difference. And when you make a cut like this and it starts drying out, look at that ratty cut up there, those cuts up over there. I'll probably try to clean up some of these old cuts, but you got to use real sharp tools and make them correct. All the cuts correct. Well, there you go. There's the finished product. That's the apricot and the plum on the right. That's a dual tree. And there's another plum over on this side here. I brought them down to about 7 feet all the way around. I did all the interior work first, then I brought down the overall size of the trees. There's quite a bit more of a reduction than I would normally like to do. This is a special circumstance, but there are a lot of special circumstances. Sometimes people have way too many fruit trees in too tight of an area, like this, or the client might be elderly and can't reach up there and shouldn't be getting up on a ladder. So take each situation, but there is a step-by-step procedure. As I said, once again, get rid of all the superfluous branches, the dead branches, the diseased branches, anything that's cracked. Once you open it all up, then start cutting out all the bad cuts, the stubs from last year. And you may not be able to get them all. They may be so laden with bad cuts, but do the best you can. And every year it'll get a little bit better and a little bit better. It's important to understand that this type of fruit tree pruning is not necessarily what you would see in an orchard. In an orchard, they've got a time constraint, and they've really got to fire through and get these things done as quick as they possibly can, and they don't really spend the time to really selectively open these branches up and do exactly what's right for the tree. Orchard trees are a crop to these farmers, and they want to process them as fast as they can, but in a homeowner situation, if you trim your trees correctly and keep up on them every year, it's not that big of a job. So get out there and trim your fruit trees. Once again, timing is very important. Better to prune them when they're dormant. Try not to prune them when they are in bloom or when the new growth is very, very tender. If you miss the early season, then very, very carefully you can prune them after they've leafed out, but you may be knocking off some of the fruit. So if the tree is going to fall apart because it's so overladen, trim it when you have to trim it, because the last thing you want is a tree that self-destructs because it's just too out of line.